Devlin, Untamed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Platform.
iOS, it's only sport. Martin Devlin, Lachlan Waugh. Welcome to the podcast, people. We do a live radio show that's not on the radio. It's only available via app. The Platform, 1 till 4 every afternoon. This, the highlights of that show. And today, the big show. Not just talking about Glenn Maxwell and that incredible innings against Afghanistan. The stats, 201 not out, 148 in boundaries off just 31 deliveries. Stood and delivered when his team needed it most. Simon Doull all over that, like Maxwell was the Afghani bowling. That's a little later on in the podcast. But dominated today with a World Cup wrap-up. Justin Marshall. So many questions to ask Justin. This interview in 2 parts. We're going to play it in full for you on the podcast. A week or more after the final, any regrets? The TMO, the influence of Wayne Barnes. How should Foz be remembered? How should Sam Cane be remembered? Did it mean more to the Saffers, Justin, who broadcast for Supersport the whole tournament? He will know that. His perspective on that. Did it mean more to them to win than it did to us? Can the tournament sustain 24 teams in 2027? Compared to other World Cups, how does he rate the French version of and Razor Robertson? So many questions about who he will select next year because he starts with a pretty clean slate. You know, that run on 23 that played the final, about 8 to 10 players will not be available next year. So much to talk about. Kick it off with the 81 Test veteran of the All Blacks. But first, we begin the show. As always, tablets in hand, I say, gather my flock. Let's assess the All Blacks from the Rugby World Cup and do it from the mountaintop.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
So how do you assess the Rugby World Cup and the All Blacks' performance in France? 1 point away from winning a 4th Rugby World Cup. But as the lessons so cruelly evident in knockout major sporting world tournaments, might as well have been an early exit in the quarterfinals for all the complete lack of any joy and satisfaction left when you get so close, but you can't close. The All Blacks overachieved, I believe, by making the final. A kind draw, a brilliant one-off performance versus Ireland, and a misfiring, regretful effort in the final. A game that could have and should have been won. How many of us, though, genuinely believed that we'd get past the best team in the world, the number 1 ranked team in Ireland? Not me. I've got to be honest about that. Hell no. Not on the evidence of the thrashing from the Springboks at Twickenham just a couple of weeks before the tourney started. Then that opening round World Cup loss to France a couple of weeks later. Those 2 results for me only confirm what we'd been seeing for the previous 3.5 years. An inconsistent side that just hasn't been able to string together any meaningful run of wins. Hasn't been able to establish the kind of consistency that we demand. Yes, that we demand from every All Black side. This has not been an easy team to like, this particular bunch of All Blacks. There's a disconnect between them and the public, the fan base. Look, forget all the schmaltzy, cheesy social media tripe that New Zealand rugby constantly puts out. I was up there, close, seeing it, feeling it. And this whole caretaker of the jersey, leaving the legacy team a better place than you've been a bloody playing for all of New Zealand rugby. It's just that. It's just rubbish. I've never felt so far away from a group of players wearing the silver fern in over 50 years of being an All Black fan. But having said all that, I am still immensely proud of my team and the effort that they put in that final in Paris. All the frustration of years of underperforming, the bumbling, inept administration, the once proud records that have continuously tumbled over these seasons, all of it for me on that night in Paris vanished. 80 minutes plus of a final, down to 14 men. The courage and determination of the All Blacks effort was everything that I have always loved about our team. There was a real heart on sleeve, no compromise, give it maximum, just completely drained the tanks from our number 1 national team. That, in that final, was the All Blacks that I've always loved, that I've always believed in, and that was the All Blacks that I really needed to see.
Devlin.
What do you want? We want information. Information. You won't get it.
The Platform.
The sports headlines, Lock.
Yes, I will start off with Glenn Maxwell.
The Big Show.
The Big Show put his nickname to good use. The Australian cricketer producing one of the most astonishing cricket World Cup, most astonishing one-day innings Well, no. One of the most astonishing batting innings ever. At least in recent memory.
But he did it when it mattered most.
Did it when it mattered most. 201 not out off 128 balls, leading Australia past Afghanistan with 19 deliveries to spare. And it sees Australia into the semi-finals. And it helps the Black Caps. You know, a lot would have had to have happened for Afghanistan to chase us down, but that helps us out. So we should actually be kind of, sheepishly, saying thank you, Australia.
All right.
Glenn Maxwell coming to the rescue, should I say, after Australia had slumped to 91 for 7. That was in reply to Afghanistan's 291 for 5 at that point when Pat Cummins came in. That's when Glenn Maxwell went nuts. Couple of stats here. Let me get the scoreboard up. He got, as I say, 201, unbeaten, did Glenn Maxwell. 128 balls he faced, 21 fours, 6 sixes. That is, what's that, 148?
Of 31 deliveries,
A strike rate of 157.
Overall. It's mind-blowing.
Here's what's better. In all of ODI cricket, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 scores of 200 and better, all time. 11 scores. Rohit Sharma's got like 4 of them. Glenn Maxwell's the only one of those scores to not be an opening batsman.
Yeah, that's a great
I found that
stat.
really
That's
interesting.
a great stat. That's a really good stat.
Think of all the brilliant batsmen who have batted 3 or 4 in the history of ODI cricket. They've never gotten 200.
No. And he
Unreal.
has.
And he has. All right, to New Zealand cricket news. Diana Pukitapu-Linden will become the first woman in the history of New Zealand cricket to fill the role of chair. This year replaces Martin Snedden. Rugby news. All Blacks prop Angus Tautau has opted to head back over the Bombay Hills to where his Super Rugby career began. He signed a 2-year deal with the Blues from next season, was released from the Chiefs on compassionate grounds so that he could be closer to family. Now, Angus, if you're from Australia and you wanted to go play for the Waratahs or someone, sure, I get it. You're about an hour down the road, son. And you play for Auckland in the NPC season. Not being critical, just curious, shall we say. Some great tennis news for Kiwi tennis fans. Young American Ben Shelton will return to the ASB Classic in 2024. He played the 2023 tournament as a wild card, making it to the second round. But he will be one of the star attractions in a few months' time. He currently ranks 16th in the world, having a very, very good year on the tennis court. Champions League this morning, Manchester City have cruised past Swiss club Young Boys 3-0 in their group match, qualifying for the knockout phase of the 2 games to spare, Erling Haaland scoring twice. Not so good, though, for Newcastle. Their hopes of getting out of their group are in serious danger after a 2-0 loss away to Borussia Dortmund. As it stands, the Magpies are last in their group, 4 points off top spot and 3 off second. Is it 4 points off top spot? 8, 7, 6, 5. 3 points off top spot, 2 points off of second. And 3 horses involved in yesterday's Melbourne Cup have reportedly pulled up lame following the event, including a previous winner of the race that stops a nation. 23 entries lined up at Flemington Racecourse yesterday afternoon before Irish Galloper Without a Fight and jockey Mark Zara eventually broke away to win by 2 lengths. And thanks to Without a Fight, I won $28. I lost 12 because I put down $40 in total. So a couple of others didn't hit. Further back in the field, Alenquer and Right You Are, along with last year's winner Gold Trip, pulled up lame. This according to The Age out of Australia. That's what's making news, Martin.
Devlin,
Oh my goodness me!
the platform.
Justin Marshall with us, 81 Test veteran of the All Blacks, and covered the World Cup for Supersport South Africa. So it's going to be fascinating to get your perspective on especially the Arps and how they celebrated that win. But Justin, let's begin at the beginning. A week or more after the final, and that's given all of us a good chance just to sort of take a breath about it and kind of reflect on what we saw. Any regrets for you about the way the All Blacks played, about the TMO, about the referee, about the result?
No, I thought, once there's a red card situation, ultimately many people feel that the contest has gone out of the game, but I certainly felt that the All Blacks just showed great fortitude. They showed real heart, and they never stopped trying. And to a degree, they actually had more possession and more ball, which goes to show that they're extremely fit. They backed themselves, and I certainly thought that, given that they were down a man for the majority of the game, they could have all but won it. So you have to be incredibly impressed and incredibly proud as a New Zealander about the way that they tackled adversity and a difficult situation and didn't bow their heads down. They puffed their chests out and got stuck in. Look, obviously there's always going to be a lot of debate about certain decisions in a game and fallout, but, there was always going to be drama in that game. I never, ever thought it was going to be anything bar a close contest, and it was going to come down to a couple of significant moments, and ultimately that's what happened, because the top 4 teams in the world, and New Zealand, South Africa are 2 of them. Then you include Wales and France and Ireland, were basically inseparable. And all of the results and all of the games when those teams played each other pretty much justified that. So, yeah, tough tournament to win, and the All Blacks just very nearly got there.
TMO and referee Wayne Barnes has retired. I don't kind of have any lingering bitterness towards him. I thought some of the decisions were a bit confusing in the game. But the overall use of the TMO, and I don't know whether you've heard what Steve Hansen said. He said, look, we're watching it in replay. Yeah, which is, I totally agree with him. Look, the refs have got to look at it in real time. We're watching it in real time as spectators. You guys, when you were playing, you're playing it in real time. Is the TMO just involved way too much at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And what they're actually looking for is they're looking to try and find something everywhere in all components of the game. They're looking to try and find an offside. They're looking to try and find a slightly untidy neck roll, high contact, a knock on. Those little parts of the game where those things can happen, and they're just part of the game where we used to accept that. But nowadays, I guess TV plays a role in it as well. When something goes wrong, if the TV coverage goes and shows a replay from 6 phases ago where there was a knock on, well, if the game doesn't cover it, then that snowballs the problem, doesn't it? So we're all out of sync at the moment of looking too hard, trying too hard, and really disrupting the flow of the game. And unfortunately, it's not only our sport it's happening in because of technology and the way technology is going. Like, all games are suffering. Like the game I went to last night, because of the injection of the TMO, I think it's the VAR, they call it over. The first half went for an extra 12 minutes, and the second half for 9 minutes longer. This is just, it's a common thread amongst all sport now that, technology is dictating the game, and we're always having to look at everything to make sure possibly something illegal hasn't happened.
What's the answer to it, mate? Is it that people just have to actually decide that what do we actually want? Do we want a flowing game? Do you want every single nitpicking thing pulled up? Because, most of the time the TMO actually technically gets it right, but the frustrating thing, as you saw last night with the VAR as well, is it stops the game. It's kind of like the whole balloon gets pricked. We score a try now and we don't, do we celebrate? No, we don't. We score a goal. Hang on a second, we've got to wait for the VAR. I don't like watching sport like that.
No, neither do I. And I certainly feel we've got to try and protect the referees and give them more control. And they'll be able to do that as long as whenever they slightly miss something, if they don't refer it or don't get referred to by the TMO for 4 phases back where there was a slight knock on, but the referee thought it came off a foot, we'll never get anywhere. And I think probably the way to go about it is to cut back. If it's not in the motion of scoring a try or the last phase before a try, and everyone knows that, well, you just have to put up with the odd shit call every now and then.
Yep.
But,
always have.
If it's in the motion of scoring or in the last ruck before, then they are able to go back and look at it. If not, then that's life. And I think if both teams, all supporters know that that's the case, and it's like, oh, well, yep, there was one there, but, sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't, then I think that'll take all of the I guess, interference out of it, of toing and froing between TMOs and referees. And just to add, I thought was bloody disgraceful the fallout and the abuse that Wayne Barnes suffered. I think our game has got a better reputation than that, and the referees are out there doing their very best. I thought the treatment of Ben O'Keefe by the French crowd was disgraceful as well. I thought he controlled his games that he refereed, quarterfinals, semi-finals, really well, but they didn't treat him very nicely at all, and I think we've got to grow up a bit and protect the referees, and ultimately, Wayne Barnes didn't give Sam Cane a red card. He referred it and let the technology do its job, but yet people took it out on him, and I think that's a real shame.
Justin Marshall is with us. We're wrapping up the whole of the Rugby World Cup, and you had a really unique perspective too, because you were, as I said earlier, calling it for Super Sport, so you're surrounded by South Africans. Justin, did it mean more to them? And I say that on the back of Sia Khaleesi's comments afterwards, which I just have really resonated with me, where he said, we did this for our whole country, the whole of South Africa. You've got to understand South Africa and come to South Africa to know what it actually means. And I'm not so sure at the moment in New Zealand, with the divisive society that we seem to be living in, that that somebody could stand up from the All Blacks, say that, and it means as much. It's no criticism, but do you see where I'm going with this? I just think that, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you, did it mean more to them? Was it somehow better for them as a country to win it?
Oh, look, I think, yeah, the argument is it's better for them as a country, but their country is in a lot different state than New Zealand. You know, politically, there's unrest there. There are economic problems. You know, they are unhealthy at the moment as a country, and there's a lot of issues there. And, you know, sport unites people, particularly rugby in South Africa. And, you know, if you just look at the parades and see the outpouring of people of, you know, sort of admiration and love for the Springboks and what they've achieved, I think it's probably really helped the country. It's galvanised them a bit where there's a lot of diversity. So, look, the argument there, I think, is fair, and you know, New Zealand probably don't need it as much. You know, many will argue differently, but that's my perspective. But I certainly feel that they certainly didn't need it in terms of a World Cup and getting 4 over our 3. I think, you know, we did enough, and ultimately, if it was coming back to New Zealand, I would have felt for South Africa because the country would be better off. But ultimately, our country could do with some, you know, some really good rugby goodwill. You know, and win a Rugby World Cup and bring it back home after what happened in 2019, I think we would have prospered as well. So, yeah, I certainly feel that I wouldn't be complaining or feeling sorry for South Africa if it did come to New Zealand, because by hell I would have loved that. And I'm sure every rugby-loving person and general public would have loved it in New Zealand as well.
How should Ian Foster and Sam Cane be remembered? Because let's remember, we were 1 point away from winning that, and this was an All Black side that went overseas where a lot of us, me included, I got to be honest, I didn't think we'd get past the quarterfinal. We've had very inconsistent, All Black-like results, as you know, all of us have brought up over the last few years, not been able to string 2, 3, 5, 6 games together in a row, you know, losing records at home, losing in a pool match at a World Cup, all of that kind of stuff. Yet, one miserable bloody point away, and what, a Richie Mwanga conversion or a Geordie Barrett penalty, you know, could have won us that World Cup. And these guys would be remembered completely differently. Ian Foster would be Sir Ian Foster. Sam Cane would be a winning All Black captain. So how do you remember them, and how do you want them to be remembered?
Well, I think they're a team that's been trying to find a way to win a World Cup final for a couple of years under Ian Foster. Obviously, you know, that's given the enforcement that he got from the New Zealand Rugby Union when his job was on the line. And, you know, since 2019, you're absolutely right. The consistency has not been there. And we have seen our history dented by this side and by this coaching group. You know, we've lost to Ireland in a home series and a test against Ireland for the first time. We've lost to Argentina on our own patch for the first time, including losing to them in Australia for the first time ever. So those things dent our history. A world record loss to South Africa. So they have an effect, and people remember that. But equally, this side has achieved, you know, significantly, you know, Bledisloe Cup wins. They've won the Rugby Championship. So in amongst that, they've done some brilliant things as well. So yeah, it's been a bit roller coaster, probably a bit too much than what people would be used to, and which would you usually accept as an All Black, and we are harsh on our All Blacks. But I guess there's that argument that the rest of the world have caught us up, and they've got to the point now where it's not mandatory that you win 13 of your 14 tests a year, and maybe we just have to accept that what we're actually getting now is real contests where the All Blacks are actually having to front up every week, and there's no real guarantees that they're going to win, and that's got to be exciting for the spectators, doesn't it? Albeit, like I said, it will ultimately affect our history. So, yeah, I think they'll be remembered as a very good side that had an excellent Rugby World Cup, and they proved a lot of critics wrong, me included, and good on them. And I think they can hold their heads very high for what they achieved in a really difficult tournament. And like you say, a goal kick or a decision maybe not to kick for touch when points were on, whatever, just the odd little thing that didn't quite flow in that game, you know, they would be remembered completely differently, but I still think they'll be remembered fondly, and we should be proud of what they did at that World Cup.
The Tight Five.
5 separate sporting topics, roughly a minute there or thereabouts on each. And when the bell does ding, we move quickly on to the next topic. Your robbery story, Lachlan. We were going to tell this yesterday. I think you've got to have time to tell it today, okay? Where you were accosted on the way home by 4 very unlikely lads. Afghanistan, Aussie overnight, the big show's innings, the greatest ever. Justin Marshall's final thoughts on the World Cup. Do you agree with him about what he said about the tournament, what a fabulous tournament it was, and that South Africa were thoroughly deserving winners? Champions League, Champions League, Champions League. When your team's not in the Champions League, do you care about the Champions League? Newcastle could be in trouble. They started off like a rocket. I'm not even going to mention my Man United are playing Copenhagen tomorrow, because if we don't get a win there, we're back in the Europa League. Rassie Erasmus is back being the Springbok coach. How much of a non-surprise is that? Let's kick it, though, and I'm sure that people will be much interested in this. So, when we could, and that was pretty much most nights, you're living in a little hotel room in Paris. When I say a little hotel room, okay, however big your bedroom is, if you've got an ensuite bathroom in your bedroom, well, then that's a massive hotel room, okay? If you've got a normal double-sized bedroom in your flat or your house where you've got a double bed in there, you've got a chest of drawers in there, that's pretty much it. You know, you got a little nook bathroom, and that's all that you've got. When we, and we put this up on social media, the studio was actually Lachlan sitting on his bed next to the bedside table and making the studio out of that. So when we weren't working, you got to get out of your hotel room. You go stir crazy, and there's just bars and cafes all around us. So we'd go down the canal or something like that.
Oh, you're entertained.
That's it, yeah. So we just sit there and look. And the other thing about sitting at these places is you've got to get used to the lack of personal space. Because in New Zealand, tables are kind of put where you have a little bit of elbow room between each other, right? Yeah. In France, you're right next to the you are touching skin to skin with the person that is next to you.
And if you've had a few, and this happened to me on one of our early nights, I had a couple of beers, and you get up to go to the bathroom, and you kind of you lose your balance a bit. You're putting your ass in the person's face next to you, and that happened to me.
Yeah,
right.
And your hand goes into their pasta. But anyway, after one of these particular nights, old man went home early. Lachlan went out, met a couple of friends, walking home. 2 very well-lit promenades, went off the beaten track just trying to connect between the 2 streets. And what happened, mate?
Oh, yeah, I was just walking home from a club at about 3 a.m. And, yeah, you're right. Well-lit streets, main roads all around me, and I took a shortcut. And look, I was walking because I couldn't get any reception. I noticed this in Paris. It's really hard to actually get your phone and the internet working.
Yeah, bloody pain in the butt, that side of it.
And so I couldn't order an Uber, but I managed to get drips and drabs of data to know roughly where I was going. It took me an hour to walk home. Anyway, we went down the side street, and there was 4 youngish men. I'd say they were slightly older than me, about my size, walking towards me, and I thought, okay, I started picking up the pace, and they were just talking to me in a foreign language. It wasn't French. It sounded Middle Eastern to me. And I just pretended I couldn't speak English because I didn't know what they were saying, and then they suggested they were saying something rather English, and I just went, no. I shook my head, and I was literally saying gibberish. I was just making up words on the spot. A couple of them put their arms around me as if they were my friends, but there was quite a firm grip, and then the other 2 were sort of in front of me. I thought, oh, heck, they're going to take my phone and my wallet, or I don't know, maybe they'll hurt me. I don't know what's going to go on here. They talked away, didn't understand them, kept them going for another maybe 30 seconds or so, and then one of them punched me in the chest, and then another guy sort of pulled him aside, and they left. And maybe I sold myself enough as just someone who didn't know what the heck was going on, couldn't speak any of their language, and they just thought, no, let's leave them to it. Managed to start running down the road, and then found my way back to the hotel safely. And then the next morning I noticed that I have this chain which I bought 7 or 8 years ago. It cost me about $700-800 when I bought it. And I've had it for years, and I always wear it. I never take it off. And I noticed it was gone.
Yeah.
I thought,
well, that was the arms around you, mate.
Arms around my neck.
And I think the thing in the chest is probably the distractor, while the guy just rips it off.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
And you don't even know.
Yeah. So
you were very lucky, actually, because
lucky.
That could have been wallet, cell phone, the whole lot gone.
Absolutely.
And there's no one around. If you're yelling for somebody, there's constant sirens and police everywhere, but it's just one of those things at night. Where the hell with the support? There's no support there, and I don't think anyone's coming running to help.
No.
And this on the back of Ian Foster's wife and his daughter Michaela being accosted by somebody with a knife. There are lots of dodgy bits of Paris, people, and one of the dodgiest is when you're on the subway late at night. You've just got to be aware when you're in a big city of all of this kind of stuff. Lucky boy. Afghanistan, Aussie overnight. Let's run through some stats here. The big show, Glenn Maxwell. You'll be seeing this all over your sports news tonight, all over the websites. 201 not out. He comes in when Australia are 4 wickets down. He gets dropped twice, and one of them was an absolute sitter when he was on 34. And they're going to be regretting that forever, Afghanistan, because if they'd won that, they'd got enough of a total, their run rate would have been good, and they would have been ahead of us on points. And if Pakistan had beaten us this coming weekend, Sri Lanka had beaten us, well, then they would have got through. But instead, he smacks 201 off 128 deliveries. 148 of those runs are in boundaries, 21 fours and 10 sixes. That 148 came off 31 scoring shots, which is almost 5 runs a shot. It's just outrageous, isn't it? So the other 53 runs came off 97 balls. Pat Cummins, 12 runs off 62 balls that he faced. So he's got 12, Maxwell 201 not out.
Just nuts.
And saves Australia. Now, Australia would have made the semis anyway because they got 10 points. They got a great run rate and everything else. The greatest one-day innings ever, do you think?
Well, the greatest in my lifetime of witnessing and watching cricket, without a doubt.
No question.
And watching the highlights, he is just stroking these balls.
He can't run.
Without,
He's cramped up.
He's just hitting them perfectly.
No legs. He's just basically swinging the bat. It's
and
timing.
it doesn't look to be any real effort either.
No.
It's just incredible.
Ian Smith's call. Brilliant.
Thrashes that through the offside for 4 more. They won't stop that either. Maxwell to 195. And Maxwell hits it high. Can it make it? It does make it. Glenn Maxwell. Unbelievable. The most remarkable thing you'll probably ever see in cricket. Staggering. Absolutely mind-blowing. What a win.
What a call. Black Spoke, no more. Black Spoke was the professional New Zealand men's cycling team in Europe, funded by Murray Bolton. I know Murray Bolton, been a massive supporter of cycling in New Zealand sport, actually of rugby, of all kinds of sport, over the years. He pulled his funding last September, and now this team will no longer exist. I look at Sport New Zealand and High Performance Sport New Zealand, Lachlan, with a budget of $500 million, who employ over 100 separate managers, all getting paid well into 6 figures.
Yeah.
And yet you can't support this. We don't have any money for this, which was creating pathways for our young cyclists to professionally compete overseas and then go on to then be handpicked for the bigger teams. What the hell is... This is what New Zealand has fallen into, isn't it, over the last 6 years? New Zealand Rugby is to say, we just spend so much money on admin, don't we? And so little on athletes. I just don't know how this equation has come about. So remember Cycling New Zealand, when we were at the Commonwealth Games last year, sent 35 people up there. 35.
And that was not long.
3 for every single person who's actually on a bike. And what do all you people do? Apart from bad haka in the stadium when the cameras are on you.
Yeah. I mean, that cycling team was independent, right?
Yeah.
Why? And that's a base that's helping our Kiwi cyclists right over there in Europe overseas, where all the big tours are.
One of the biggest sports in the world are those cycling tours of Europe. You've got to be there. You know, honestly, everyone talks about the tour.
Why are they funding that?
I guess it's a head scratching, mate, isn't it?
And there were some big names in that team as well.
Yeah.
Huge names.
Yeah. Aaron Gate, one of them. Champions League. Newcastle are in trouble. They drew their first game at Milan. They beat PSG. They've just lost twice to Dortmund. Man City are the first team through. They've won 4 out of 4. Are you bored with the Champions League? Are you?
Yes. Well, my team's not in it. So.
Your team's not in it?
But also, every year where there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where there was Barcelona, there was Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid were a niggly, nasty team that got their way to finals. Juventus were a good team that got to a couple of finals. There was Bayern Munich. Dortmund every now and then would make life hard for some teams. And then you had about 3 or 4 Premier League teams. Man City, Chelsea, you guys before you became really, really bad. Us in the early stages, well, when Jurgen Klopp, of course, took over. There were so many teams. Mm-hmm. So many teams.
Yeah.
And now it feels like there's just none.
Yeah, now it feels like
really feels like there's none.
Like there's Man City and Bayern Munich, maybe.
Maybe. Barcelona are kind of resurrecting themselves. Real, maybe. They're actually looking all right.
Man City.
There's just it's Man City to lose.
It kind of just feels a bit dull at the moment.
Don't worry, you guys will lose in the group stage, and then you'll draw us at one point in the Europa League, and then we'll knock you out.
Yeah, get Kane. Rassie Erasmus taking back the reins of the Springbok coach. Is that as much of a surprise as Eddie Jones becoming Japanese coach again?
No. Actually, yes, in a sense. I didn't think he'd go back to labelling himself as the head coach, going from director of rugby to being the head coach. So he's kind of gone from coach to director of rugby back. But he was the coach anyway. You know, you look at him at the World Cup, you look at him right there in the coaching box. I don't know what director of rugby is. I don't know what it means. I don't know what makes it different from the head coach of the Springboks.
You kind of got the
He's
feeling...
kind of been the coach anyway.
Yes. I mean, Nenabar has... Apparently they've worked together. They obviously know their roles. Well, Jurassi's in charge and the other guy pretends he is. I think that's their roles, isn't it? Well, that's what everyone assumes. It's no surprise to me at all. I mean, who else was going to coach that side? He's going to go for a hat-trick,
another assistant.
What he's going to do is he's going to try and become the greatest coach ever in the history of international rugby by winning back-to-back World Cups. That's what I reckon he's staying for.
Yeah, probably.
One more topic to go then. Just in terms of the All Blacks and the final thoughts from Justin Marshall on the Rugby World Cup. 24 teams in Australia or not? I think it's ridiculous. I just don't think that international rugby's in a position to be able to produce 24 competitive teams.
I think what you need to do is you need to establish competitions outside of the World Cup for all of these teams you're trying to make better. Get them more games against the bigger teams, but get them to a point where they can qualify for the World Cup consistently. Because there were 4 or 5 teams at the World Cup this year that you can't really say shouldn't be there because they did qualify, but they were just absolutely destroyed by the bigger team. Like
Namibia,
we
Romania.
Was it 96-0 we beat Namibia?
Italy.
Well, Italy have been a pretty good side for a couple of years. I mean, they beat Australia last year. They've gotten wins over Scotland over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And yet we put 96 on them, which was a bit strange. So, you know, there's one side of the argument when you get the likes of Portugal who turned up and were threw a real spanner in the works in their pool. And then Chile, I think, for their first World Cup weren't too bad. They nearly beat, was it Samoa? They weren't too far off in that game. But then you get Namibia and Romania who are pretty disappointing, and they've been to the last 4 or 5 World Cups. So I think it's more about how you need to structure your competition. I mean, the answer is a global season. It's been the answer, I think, for about 3 or 4 years, and I didn't like it initially because I thought it took away from not the power, but the control, in a sense, that we had over our own game and our own players and teams. But you've got to do that if you're going to grow the game internationally.
I think it's all about the United States. They're so embarrassed that they missed out this time. They've got a Rugby World Cup coming there in 2031, and if they don't actually qualify for Australia in 2027, it's going to be a complete and utter shambles.
Devlin.
Back with Justin Marshall then, part 2 of the chat that we had today, just wrapping up the whole of the World Cup, and in particular focusing this bit on Scott Robertson as well, because when it comes to cattle, he's lost a fair few selecting next year. Does he keep those that are in their positions in the All Blacks at the moment in those same positions, or does he completely revamp this squad? What does Justin think also of who will be playing 9 and 10 for the All Blacks, because that combination, Aaron Smith and Richie Mo'unga, neither of those guys no longer available. Razor next year, and what's he got to work with? And especially looking at your position 9 and 10, because we got a brand new combination now at the base of the scrum, so crucial to any side, especially an All Black side. When you lose Aaron Smith and you lose Richie Mo'unga, and those guys looked as though at the World Cup, Justin, they could have gone on for at least another 2 or 3 seasons each. So what has Razor got left now with all of the players leaving? And also, what do you expect him to do? Is it going to be a brand new All Black side or not?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Marty, and I think it's a valid one too. And it's going to be interesting off the back of what I just said about, Ian Foster and his reign as All Black coach and the players that he had under them. And yes, many of them will be missing. It'll be really, to me, interesting to see how much rope the New Zealand rugby public give Scott Robertson, given that he's going to have quite a different looking side to work with. He's still going to have some of the key players that that have been a part of Ian Foster's side for a while. Your Geordie Barretts, Rieko Ioanes, player front rowers, Cody Taylor. There's still a good nucleus of them there.
Loose forwards,
Barrett, but equally, like you said, the halves will be completely different. Will there be a change? There could possibly be a change at fullback. It might take a little bit of time, and he's not going to have a great amount of time. You hit June, and then it's into obviously the Rugby Championship, and that's going to be a really interesting Rugby Championship to see where Australia are as well, because they're in all sorts of turmoil. I don't feel we're in that position. I feel we're really a really good position of depth. And the one thing about Scott Robertson is he does his homework. and he does his due diligence, and he would have been already thinking about what type of game he now wants the All Blacks to, under his reign and under his campaign and his guidance, what sort of game plan, what sort of style do they is he going to play, and is he going to, get the All Blacks back to that number one place in the world, and who are the players, if so, that'll fit into that plan? That's the fascinating thing.
At some stage, and is it going to happen in the near future, do we need to start relaxing these overseas playing laws? Maybe put in a caveat that you've got to play 50 tests for your country, and then you can be selected from overseas in another league, or you've got to play X amount of Super Rugby games. It's working for South Africa. They've won 2 World Cups now back-to-back, Justin, and they've got players playing all over the world. Can we continue with the policy that we have that you've got to stay in New Zealand? Is that sustainable?
I think it's sustainable because of our player depth. And you only have to look at Super Rugby and how successful our super teams are. I do feel that we're suffering a little bit from not paying the South African teams, because we're able to bully the Australian teams up front. You don't bully South African pack, so you have to find another way to beat their defence, beat their aggression, beat their combativeness. And not having regular games against them in Super Rugby, I think, has put us slightly behind physically where we have been in the past, particularly, the successful sort of 2011 to 2015 World Cup victories where we were a very good physical side, and that was due to playing South Africa regularly. So, look, I really struggle to answer this question. Could we actually do with bringing Aaron Smith back because we don't have the depth at 9 and we feel underdeveloped if he's played over 100 tests? Well, it doesn't feel to me fair the way that you govern that a 10 test All Black like Lester Fainganuku can't be allowed to come back, but he could be massively pivotal for the All Blacks in the next five years or so, but yet because of the criteria he's being basically restrained or traded by the fact that he hasn't played enough tests. So it's complicated, mate. I think I'm probably going to have to for once. And you know me, I'm usually pretty good at answering your questions.
You're on the fence. You got to sit there.
Do the old give it the Basil brush, mate. I don't know if that's the right way to be sort of signing off 2023, but it's only taken you 9 months to stump me.
Yeah. Well, look, let's wrap it up then. Compare France to the other World Cups that you've been. I'll tell you what, just a few impressions that I had. I had a fabulous time, mate. We arrived a week before the quarterfinal, and building up to that was the best rugby match I've ever been physically present at. So exciting. And when you're watching your own team play and play with such courage and conviction and also upset the odds as that following night, France versus South Africa, and when that stadium started, they all started bouncing and jumping. I'd never experienced that at a rugby game. Then you get into the semi-final, and our one was a bit of a cakewalk, but that South Africa game in the semi-final for them against England was just, again, gripping rugby, despite the fact it may have been, kind of not the most flowing game, but by God, it was intense. And then you get to the final and the atmosphere there, and, there's something about it being in Europe. I'd love it to go to a World Cup in South Africa, Justin, because I've never been to that country, and I should imagine that would be an amazing place to watch it as well. But just in terms of the World Cups, I actually think good on World Rugby. The tournament is getting better and bigger. I'm not convinced that adding another 4 teams is the answer at all, and I think the 20 teams is probably the best model. But look, overall, as a tournament, and how lucky were we to be in France watching that, mate? Brilliant.
Absolutely, yeah, and I totally agree with you. I don't feel that the extra 4 teams is going to be of any benefit to that Rugby World Cup, and I don't feel it's fair. We don't want the blowouts that we saw, in some of the games. 60, 70, 80, 90 points is not healthy for anybody. So I feel that the criteria is pretty tough and strict now, and I'd even probably drop a couple of teams if that was at all possible. So just to keep the quality high and to keep the interest in all of the games and all the pool matches high. But in terms of a spectacle and as hosts of the French, I thought they did an outstanding job. And, France is a very easy country to get around, but their stadia is magnificent. There wasn't a bad stadium. There wasn't a stadium that wasn't full. And that is a real credit to ticket sales and the French loving their rugby. Even for, I think it was Portugal versus Tonga or whoever it was, one of those, the games that you could maybe only 3/4 sell the stadium, it was full. So, incredible circumstances, and I think they did a brilliant job. And let's not forget, in September and up until the end of the quarterfinals, the weather was literally in the 30s, and so we had to have water stops. And equally, we had fast-flowing, entertaining rugby and not a lot of TMO interference. It all started from semi-finals onwards, where for all 4 games, both semi-finals and the final, so 3 games, where's my math going? It rained, and it rained significantly. And that changes the way the game's played, and it changes the player's skill, and it changes the contact areas because, players have to grip the ball a bit more. So, the weather did play a part in the finish in Paris, where it was wet for all those 3 last games, and that changed the game, and it meant, I think it meant more TMO interference because there wasn't really any up until the end of the quarterfinals. And look at the quarterfinals we had in dry conditions, like you said. 2 incredible games of rugby in Paris. Magnificent.
They're calling it the greatest one-day innings ever. Not just one of them, but ever. There's only been 11 men who have hit 200 or more runs in one-day internationals. And overnight, Glenn Maxwell, a.k.a. the big show for Australia against Afghanistan, just an incredible performance. The stats came in with 4 wickets down. He was dropped a couple of times, survived a pretty dodgy LBW. Thought he was actually out, started to wander off, got recalled on that. When Cummins came to the wickets, Aussie was 7 down. This guy thumped 201, including 148 of those in boundaries, and those just off 31 deliveries. Simon Doull rating that innings. Simon, when you go through those stats, and I'll repeat them again for people, they're just insane. He hit 148 in boundaries off 31 deliveries, 201 not out, and at the other end, Cummins 12 off 68. It's just brilliant, isn't it?
I mean, we have been privileged to some phenomenal one-day innings at different times. I mean, Martin Guptill's 237. I'm old enough to remember Viv Richards' 187. AB de Villiers scoring 100 off 40-something balls. I don't think I've seen a better 50-over innings in my life. And, you couple with the fact that he's obviously cramped up. They are 7 wickets down. He's got a bloke at the other end who's 12, got 68 balls. He can't run. The clean hitting and the power that he possesses and showed on last night was just exceptional. The clarity of mind to just be able to do that. I know he had chances, I know there were opportunities, but man, you go a long way to see a better under pressure. All of those big scores I've talked about in general terms have been setting totals, not chasing totals, not under pressure. All of the big hundreds in this tournament generally have been in setting circumstances, not in chasing circumstances. So, that adds pressure to it. It was just unbelievable. I'm still a bit staggered as to what I've seen, and I think we'll be talking about this for a long, long time.
Yeah, great stats there. He is, of the 11, he's the only one that was in a chasing side. He's also the only one that wasn't an opening batsman. So, and you think about all of the great number 3s and 4s that have come in, and for him to do that. Simon, in the end, though, mate, I mean, was the bowling just inadequate? Because the guy was cramped up. I mean, we watched the highlights today. He could hardly move. He was swinging it like a baseball bat.
Yeah, and every time he went down with cramp, and he did it often, I could not believe that one of the Afghanistan support staff were not out there talking to their bowlers saying, we have to take it slow and we have to take it wide of off stump. We've got to bowl just inside that tram line and make him reach for it. They went into body. They bowled at his body time and time again, and he just bashed it out of the park. So there were some really poor options. For a team that has been quite clinical throughout the early parts of the tournament, they just fell They faltered last night, and they succumbed to pressure. They stopped trying to win the game, and you know what this is like, Marty, whether it be football, whether it be rugby, any sport you play, when you stop trying to win and you actually start to defend, you go negative. And that's exactly what I saw with Afghanistan last night, which is a real shame because they played 75% of that game absolutely brilliantly.
And if they had won it, I mean, I think the run rates are beyond me mathematically, but if they had won it scoring 290 or something, and they had bowled Australia out cheaply, would that up their run rate? What I'm trying to figure out is if they'd won that game, they would have gone to 5-3. How much pressure would they put on us?
Well, a win would still be fine for New Zealand. They were so far behind Pakistan's net run rate and New Zealand's net run rate that it wasn't funny. So they were they had to bowl Australia out for under 170 to catch Pakistan. So that was their goal, was probably to bowl them out for under 170 to catch Pakistan. Obviously, that didn't happen. If New Zealand win by 1 run, let's say tomorrow, let's say Sri Lanka score 250 and we get 252 in the 49th over, Pakistan would have to beat England by around about 130 runs.
That's possible, isn't it?
Or knock off whatever England score, in 29, 30 overs. So that's a possibility, but it's not a highly likely possibility. That's where we're at with the sort of run rate difference at the moment.
Okay, Doull is in India. He's at the airport. He's on his way and will be there for Sri Lanka versus New Zealand. Now, Rahul was telling us yesterday that there's a 78% chance of rain and thunderstorms. You've been watching that. Has it changed at all?
Yep, it has changed. There was sort of 50% chance yesterday, 40 today, and down to about 30 tomorrow. So the forecast has improved throughout the day. The one thing about Bangalore at this time of year is you will get showers, you will get sort of not heavy downpours. But the outfield is fantastic. It does drain magnificently well. Generally, you get enough time play, especially if you sort of get the whole of the first innings, and then you get the showers start to come. So basically, the second innings is shortened, and you don't get 20 overs. So that's the only issue when the rain sort of comes in around about that 6-7 o'clock at night time. So I think we will get enough time to play at least a 20 over match, and I think it deserves a 20 over match. New Zealand probably will be desperate for a win. They haven't been at their best in the last 4 games, and it's cost them.
To hear the full interview, download the platform at the App Store. Via Platform Plus, you can go back and listen to the whole show and all of the interviews in full. That's our podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to listen to the entire show 1 till 4, Monday to Friday, download the Platform app, and via Platform Plus you can go back and listen to whatever shows over however many weeks at your leisure, at your listening pleasure. Platform Plus. First thing to do, though, is download the Platform app.
Devlin.
Unbelievable! Incredible!
The Platform.